There is a pile of fresh-cut grass clippings sitting beside my grandfather's tomato patch right now, still green, still smelling of summer. In a few weeks, the tomatoes in that patch will be bigger, heavier, and redder than the ones in the neighbor's garden down the road, the fellow who spends good money every spring on bags of fertilizer and bags of store mulch and little jars of moisture crystals. And my grandfather will not have spent a single dime, just a rake, a wheelbarrow, and the grass he was going to cut anyway. Folks think there is some big secret to growing tomatoes. There is not. There is one simple, free thing my people did that most gardeners today throw in a bag and haul to the curb. And once you understand why it works, you are going to feel a little foolish for ever buying any of that store-bought stuff. And I say that with love. You have probably stood over your own tomato plants watching the fruit crack open or go black on the bottom, or the whole plant just sulk in the heat no matter how much you water it. And in the next few minutes, I am going to show you my grandfather's grass trick that fixes all of it at once for free. But I am also going to tell you the one mistake that turns this blessing into a curse and kills your tomatoes dead. So stay with me all the way, because that part matters as much as the trick itself. And I will tell you the part that ought to bother you a little too, which is that the garden store has a whole shelf of products to fix the very problems this free pile of grass solves. And they would much rather sell you the bag than have you learn what your grandmother knew. There is a reason for that, and I will get to it. So let me start with the why, because if you do not understand this, none of the rest will stick. You have to understand what a tomato plant actually wants. A tomato is a thirsty, hungry plant, and more than anything, it is a plant that hates surprises. It wants its water and its food slow and steady, the same amount day after day. And here is what almost nobody tells you. Nearly every tomato trouble you have ever had comes from that one thing going wrong. Think about bare dirt around a tomato in July. You water it good in the evening and the ground is soaked. Then the sun comes up and beats down on that naked soil all day, and by afternoon it is bone dry and cracking. Then you soak it again. Wet, bone dry every single day. That plant is riding a roller coaster. And that roller coaster is exactly what splits your tomatoes open. When the ground goes suddenly wet after being dry, the fruit drinks too fast and swells too quick, and the skin cannot keep up, so it cracks right open. That black leathery rot on the bottom of your tomatoes, the one that breaks your heart, that comes from the same swinging, from the plant not being able to pull up steady what it needs when the water keeps disappearing. It is not a disease you can spray. It is a water problem, a steadiness problem. So the whole secret to a tomato is keeping that ground underneath it even, cool, damp, and steady all day long, never soaked and never bone dry. Get that right, and most of your tomato troubles simply vanish. Now, how did my grandfather keep that ground steady for free without standing there with a hose all day? That is where the grass comes in. My grandfather called it laying down the blanket, and that is exactly what it is. A blanket of grass clippings spread 2 or 3 inches thick right on top of the soil, all around the base of every tomato plant, covering that bare dirt completely so you can hardly see the ground at all. And that simple grass blanket does 3 jobs at once, which is why it is worth more than any 3 things you could buy at the store. The first job is water. That blanket of grass shades the soil and keeps the hot sun from ever touching it. And covered soil does not dry out. A couple of inches of grass clippings can cut the water that escapes into the air by nearly half. So the ground under that blanket stays cool and damp, and even for days instead of baking dry by noon. There is your steadiness. There is the end of your cracked fruit and your black bottoms, just from keeping that dirt covered. You will water half as much and your plants will do twice as well. The second job is food, and this is the part that puts the fertilizer companies out of business at your house. Fresh green grass clippings are one of the richest free feeds there is, packed with nearly 4% nitrogen, which is the very thing that fertilizer companies charge you good money for in a bag. As that grass blanket sits there and slowly breaks down, it feeds that nitrogen down into the soil, slow and gentle, right where the tomato roots are waiting. It is a slow, steady, free feeding all season long. My grandfather never bought a bag of tomato fertilizer in his life because he was growing his fertilizer every time he mowed. And the third job is that the blanket smothers the weeds. Covered ground cannot sprout weeds because the weed seeds never get the light they need. So while the neighbor is out there on his knees pulling weeds in the heat, my grandfather is sitting on the porch because his grass blanket did the weeding for him for free. Water, food, and weeds. 3 of your biggest tomato chores all handled at once by the grass you were going to throw away. Now, here is that mistake I promised you, and you must hear this part because it is the one way this free blessing can turn around and kill every tomato you own. Do not under any circumstances use grass clippings from a lawn that has been sprayed with weed killer. I mean it. A lot of folks these days spray their yards with chemicals to kill the dandelions and the clover. And that poison does not just disappear. It stays right there in the clippings. And if you take those poison clippings and lay them around your tomatoes, that weed killer will leach down into your soil and curl your tomato leaves up into little claws and stunt them or kill them outright. The tomato is one of the most sensitive plants there is to that stuff. So use grass only from a lawn you know has not been sprayed. Your own, if you keep it clean and chemical-free, or a neighbor's you can trust. If there is any doubt, do not use it. That one rule is the whole difference between a blessing and a disaster. And 2 smaller things so you do it right. Do not pile a thick, soggy mat of fresh green clippings right up against the stem of the plant. And do not dump 6 inches on at once because a big wet pile can heat up and turn slimy as it rots. Lay it on in thin layers, an inch or 2 at a time. Let it dry down to a nice hay and add more as the season goes. And leave a little breathing room right around the stem. Do that and your blanket stays sweet and does its work all summer. So now you see why my grandfather's tomatoes shame the neighbors every single year and why he never spent a dime to do it. And that brings me back to the part that ought to bother you. The garden store sells you fertilizer for the food. It sells you bags of mulch for the water and the weeds. It sells you little jars of crystals to hold moisture. A whole shelf of products, every one of them costing money, every one of them needing bought again next year. And a single pile of free grass clippings does the work of all of them, better and for nothing. But there is no money in telling you to use the grass you already have. There is a great deal of money in selling you a bag. So the free way, the way every mountain family knew by heart, quietly got forgotten, and the bagged way got all the shelf space and all the advertising. It was never about what worked best. It was about what somebody could sell. That is exactly why we made this channel, to hand back the old mountain knowledge, the way it was handed down to me, the simple free skills that let a family grow its own food and feed its own soil without owing anybody a dime. If this stirred something in you, subscribe and stay a while, because we are digging it all back up, one piece at a time. So here is what I want you to do this very week. The next time you mow, do not bag those clippings and haul them off. Rake them up and lay them down 2 or 3 inches thick around your tomato plants, a nice blanket over all that bare dirt, leaving a little room at the stem. Just make dead sure that grass has not been sprayed with anything. Then step back and watch what happens over the next few weeks. How the ground stays damp, how the weeds stop coming, how the fruit stops cracking, and how your plants take off. Then come back and tell me in the comments how it went. And while you are there, tell me this. What is the one crop that gives you the most trouble in your garden? Tomatoes, beans, squash, whatever it is. Tell me, because I read every single comment, and your troubles are what I dig up the old fixes for. I want to know what you are fighting with out there. Next time, I am going to show you the old mountain way to keep the bugs off those same tomato plants without a drop of poison, using nothing but 2 things you already have in your kitchen. My grandmother swore by it, and it works better than anything in a spray bottle. Subscribe so you do not miss it. So let me leave you with what my grandfather left me. He grew the finest tomatoes in the holler off nothing but the grass he was already cutting, because he knew the secret was never in a bag. It was steady ground, kept cool and fed and covered, the freeway, the way the mountains always did it. Water, food, and weeds, all handled by a blanket of grass, while the neighbor spent his money and pulled his weeds and wondered how the old man did it. They told you good tomatoes come from a bag at the store. My grandfather knew better. They come from the ground itself and from the grass you were about to throw away. Put down the blanket this week and watch your tomatoes change. And remember, the mountains never forgot how to feed themselves. Now you know it too.